right. Hey, Tisson Mathew here. I'm with a company called SkyPoint. I'm the founder and CEO of the company. I started the company in May of last year with the premise of building a software platform that makes data actionable for marketers. And my background is in computer science. I graduated in 2004 from Oregon Graduate Institute, which doesn't exist right now. It's called OHSU or PSU or whatever else. So I still have a diploma from OHSU. People ask me, did you actually go to medical school? It's like, no. Actually, the school doesn't exist, got acquired by OHSU, and OHSU decided OGI should go back to PSU. So then last research, it's actually back in PSU now. So then I spent a couple of years at Intel. I was a research scientist there in Intel Labs. Then after that, I founded a company called IVIA. We did an e-commerce software platform, which I sold in 2012. I was in Amazon.com for a couple of years. And then prior to SkyPoint, I was a CTO of Cambia Health Solutions in downtown Portland. So I'm very excited to be here. I know Greg and Ron and the team has done a fabulous job of reviving Power BI. And I didn't know Power BI would go anywhere 5 years ago because I thought, what does this tool do? Well, how would you run reporting on the cloud? Don't you need Tableau? So now to where the product is, which is amazing. So we are a company that is partially funded by Microsoft. So they've been a great support to us from the get-go. We are part of the startup program, and we are running on Azure and all that. So that is about the company and myself. And I have a couple of questions to understand the audience. So first is, how many of you are marketers or something to do with marketing in the audience? Just one. Just Ron does marketing, like 2-3 people. You do. That makes yourself somewhat of a marketer. You're helping marketers market, right? Yeah. That's about it. Okay. So how about customer experience, customer service, customer experience? Any of those departments in the company? Right. There. Okay. So Power BI doesn't have that kind of penetration into those organizations, especially in marketing. Most marketers live in spreadsheets or getting printed PDFs, or they're in their email tool, or they're in Salesforce and tools like that, right? So one of our goals is to kind of broadly look at the platform, Power Platform itself. And I'm going to touch on Power Platform in its entirety, from Power BI data flows to Power Automate to Power Platform, Azure Data Services, Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Bricks. So we had 4 different user groups kind of combined in this presentation. So it's going to be fairly technical. So we're going to go deep on some subjects. Definitely ask questions. We won't be seeing any dashboards in this presentation because we are going to be focusing on data management. And obviously, you can present data in any way possible. You can write queries or can build dashboards. But the goal of organizing the data and matching it together is what we're going to focus on. So the goal of our organization is to personalize customer experience. Of this presentation is to personalize customer experience with Power BI. So this is the introduction, and then we'll go into Power BI data flows. How many of you heard about Power BI data flows? Oh, that's great. How about common data model? Oh, that's 40%. Okay. And majority of the times when I go talk to a customer, they don't know either of those. Power BI, I thought it was you guys are building dashboards. The second is what is common data model? They don't even know, right? So that's good. And then I'll do a demo of our product, which is a SaaS product. It's fully built on Azure, integrates all of these things in, and we have a lot of custom code built in as well, and a Q&A right after. Okay, so this is our mission, is to help companies organize their customer data to make it accessible and actionable. That is the hard part. Accessibility is one thing, and how to make the data actionable is really hard. So, all right, so the problem statement, very quickly I'll go through it. Fragmentation of data. So how many of you believe fragmentation of data in organizations is a real problem? Should be everybody. How many of you believe it's an unsolved problem? That's it? All right. So fragmentation is a big issue. The solutions to it also is fragmented, right? So I will get to why Satya is talking about citizen developers, why you have to enable developers within an organization who are not developers to build applications, right? So the first thing is the data is fragmented across applications. So all views is you're actually getting a single view of data. And then it is, how many of you have seen the ad with Common, the rapper, about you're seeing a fragment of the data? How many of you have seen that? AI, make the view visible. Yeah, he was actually in the Blazer game like a couple of weeks ago. I think he was ready for Damian Lillard's engagement party. I didn't know why he was there. I saw him. So his point of view is like, how do you know the whole picture if you are actually seeing only just a small portion of it, right? You think data is unified and organized, but it's really not, right? So it's a bigger challenge. So essentially the volume diversity of data is just growing, and it is becoming really hard for customers to understand the full data. Okay, so here comes common data model. I think if you guys know it, it's going to be just a quick refresher on it. If you look at on the left side, so the roots of common data model came from Dynamics 365. The challenge has been one, Dynamics always was focusing on as a CRM, and then they started adding marketing, started adding finance. So the challenge for the team was to figure out is there a data model that work across the board. So Microsoft started a very ambitious project about 10 years ago to create something called a unified one single platform that will do it all. The whole thing collapsed under Steve Ballmer. I think probably they spent $1 billion and completely shut down the project, right? And then Satya took over this project, created a new initiative around it, broke down the application to smaller pieces. So now if you see Dynamics 365, it's a collection of modules or a collection of services. It's not a monolithic application. So point number one, you cannot build any more monolithic applications and think that you're going to win. If Microsoft can do it, it's going to be extremely hard for anyone else to do it, right? So it has to be small components and pieces of things that will come together. The second is common data service, which is a service that is now powering all Dynamics products. That includes CRM, finance, ops, field service, all of them is under one umbrella, right? So right below it is common data model, which is a schema. It's a representational schema. There's about 300 or so entities in it. It is represented in common format. So there is a common format for contact, a common format for accounts. You don't really have to use that schema. You can create your own, but it can be still under the same structure. So the beauty of it is that Power BI can directly read from CDM. So if you actually ingest data and convert into common data model in Azure Data Lake Gen 2, which is the landing place, which basically is a blob storage, and Power BI can directly read through it. So there's two advantages to it. One is the cost of data sitting in any sort of data warehouse, it doesn't matter if it's SQL or not, it is 30 times higher than even Cosmos. Cosmos prices is significantly higher than a blob storage. So it's 2 cents for Azure Data Lake Gen 2 and 25 cents per GB per month for Cosmos DB. So it's a significant price difference when it comes about large amount of data. The second is it can actually read that data through Power BI data flows and into Power BI. The second beautiful part is Power BI can ingest data straight through data flows and then push that data down into the CDM folder inside Azure Data Lake Gen 2 as well. And then we had an ISV partner who actually utilized the common data model and built a customer data platform product. So there are 3 companies. There are about 80 vendors who are doing customer data platforms around the globe. It's a $1 billion market. A lot of players in the space. Microsoft as and Adobe are the only 3 companies who have a customer data platform on CDM. Everyone else have figured out a way to proprietarily create their own schema, and it's not great for customers because you have vendor lock-in, right? So nobody understands their own schema, so it's not standardized. Common data model is fully on GitHub. We actually contribute back to GitHub any sort of changes we make. We wrote a bunch of connectors to it. It's published back in GitHub as well. And the last portion of it is Azure Data Services, where the same data can be now consumed by Databricks, for example, directly into Databricks. Azure Data Factory and all of the other services can consume it. So the beauty of this is, if you look at the left side, no code analyst type job roles can create actionable work, and a data scientist can actually use it, right? So think of that, because earlier this was not really possible. So a data analyst or a business analyst was getting frustrated by, oh, what kind of view of data is I'm looking at? How do I get that across to a data scientist? And the so-called data scientists who are getting paid a lot of money was actually doing the work who analysts do, right? And it was not fun work for them either, but they were getting way too much compensation for something that can be done by an analyst, plus they lack the business knowledge. So what happens is, from my own personal experience, the data scientists go sit with the data analyst, spend two people's money, actually, and do the analyst work, and then push the data across, right? So this is a huge benefit in people productivity and collaboration as well. So any questions here? This part? Oh, okay. Any questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
Let me come over there real quick. This is my first time to one of these meetings, so
yeah.
This is probably kind of a super novice question, but you were kind of expanding upon the problem with data scientists doing business analyst work. What is essentially what is the ideal work that business analyst is doing versus data scientists?
Excellent question. So if you look at, take an example of a CSV file, right? A simple CSV file has 10 columns, right? Each of those columns have certain column names in it. A data scientist who doesn't have the business background don't understand what each column means, right? So then they go to this analyst and it's like, okay, this column says, I can give you a couple of examples. Member ID. So is member ID, what is member ID? What does it denote? What is the labels around it? So they would go back to the analyst trying to figure out each column does it represent, and then figure out how to create their model to really create an actual output, right? As the simplest example. So just a column. Then rows have, so for example, if a column is a JSON structure, it's even more complicated. So what CDM does is it allows the analyst to really map these columns to data understandable semantic labels. So you can actually say, okay, this column is an address, and this address is not an international address, and this is how it is represented, and it actually goes into the common data model. And when a data scientist look at it, they'll know, hey, this column really means something, and I can understand it. Now I can build my model around it. So I don't need to go back and try to re-understand what really the semantic labels are, right? This is probably the simplest example. I'm sure there's very complex scenarios where you understand the business. Right? Great question, by the way. Excellent question. Any other questions? Oh, okay. So this is a poster that is available on GitHub. Actually, you can download it and print it out if you want. But this is Microsoft's, they have a dedicated team around common data model and updating it. There are critiques around it. The critiques always say, if you create a model, people are not going to follow it and the model will die. Okay? And thou shalt not create a model. And then what happens is everyone creates their own models. Right? And then you go back and say, I shall not create a model, but you created one, right? So you're contradicting yourself, right? So when Satya started with Microsoft CEO, he made a statement around, they created something called One ES, or One Engineering System, right? And one of his comments were, there were inside Microsoft, there were 200 XML parsers. 200 for parsing XML. Why? Oh, I'm an engineer. I ain't using your code. I'm writing my own, right? I'll write my own code. By the way, mine will be better than yours. And the next guy coming along is doing the same thing. So same case with data models. There was no common framework. So Microsoft CEO and Adobe CEO and SAP CEO came together in Ignite in 2018. They announced something called Open Data Initiative, which is really putting the muscle behind and funding a team to create something that is extensible, that other people can contribute and also leverage and make it completely open source. So that's what they did. And the guy who actually who's a lead architect, he's actually the guy who created SSIS architecture, Power BI. He worked in Power BI early on. Excellent guy, PhD in computer science. A very smart gentleman who actually is still leading this effort. So a strong team behind it. It's not complete. It still have a lot of room to grow. But if you're starting off a company like us, for us, this was a huge starting point. Because we don't have to go reinvent the wheel on how accounts and contacts and a lot of the standard structures work, and then figure out how the integration touch points work. I can tell you some of the areas that it is very strong at. It's very strong at the CRM areas and finance areas. Not really strong in the digital experience side, like when it comes to website interactions and things like that. Some of the other areas that they are still developing on human resources or dynamics talent is new to the platform itself. So some of the areas are being developed. But to get started, if you're an organization looking at standardization of data across your company, this is a great starting point. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
How can one access it, review it, maybe go a little deeper in depth? Oh, sorry. So I'm assuming it's common, it's available for everybody, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only private.
Yeah, only premium. I'm just kidding. No.
You can only come in if you got it.
Yeah, premium $5,000. Is that $5,000 a month?
6.
$6,000 a month.
Oh no, 5 grand.
Oh,
And then you have your author licenses as well.
Yeah. Just kidding.
Getting the licenses.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is our solution. What it does is it integrates data from all the different sources. It stitches it together. There's a process called MDM, or Master Data Management. We run it on Spark. We integrate data around people and stitch it all together to do something called a consumer 360 or 360 view of an individual. Could be our customers. And then we'll transition that to activate different channels. So for example, if you want to say, I want to find out who all of my loyal customers are and send an email to these loyal customers with a $50 gift card for Christmas, right? So figuring out who your loyal customers are a very high level statement, right? So like, okay, what does loyal customer mean? So we have a lot of predictive algorithms that can tell you this is potentially your loyal customer or not. Then there is something called customer lifetime value. I'm not an expert at it, but should be something you should be really looking at when you're creating 360 and really driving your business decisions. So this is kind of a very high level presentation of what our solution is. Yeah. And this is the technical details of it. So we strongly use CDM. As you can see, the data flows wherever that is Power BI data flows. Power BI data flows are ingesting data from different sources and pushing that data to Azure Data Lake Gen 2 in CDM format.
Would you please zoom in so we can see some of the slides? It's hard to see.
Ooh. That is going to be screen. I wish Mac had touch screen, to zoom.
The presentation deck will be available online.
Okay, thanks.
Is that okay? Sure, otherwise we, zooming from my iPad. What is that?
You want to walk through it maybe? So just like
Yeah, totally. So I think the left side is starting with Power BI. Power BI data flows is a data ingest mechanism. It connects to something like a blob storage or SQL Server, any data store that you have. How many of you write M queries and Power Queries? Oh, perfect. So yeah, everybody does. So yeah, this is a perfect place to do it. It actually can do great work with your employees and push the data to Azure Data Lake Gen 2. So how many of you are actually utilizing Azure in the business? Azure, few of you. So if you're a data flow developer, you're writing M queries, you probably want to work with your IT to get some level of read access into your Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Because what Microsoft has is, there is a Power BI Azure Data Lake Gen 2, but it's Power BI's own. It is not your enterprise's. So you want to work with your IT team to really give you that access right, so you can actually write to the enterprise data store. The problem is, say if you have a data scientist or other software developers, they don't use Power BI, they can use this blob storage, which is not belonging to Power BI. And also you can circumvent the licensing with this mechanism, where you can still use a Power BI Pro license, which is what, $9 a month, and then push the data downstream to Azure Data Lake Gen 2, and then continue your business without going premium. And also you can do Power BI embedded, which is in Azure, which is significantly cheaper as well. So you can use a combination of Power BI Pro and Power BI embedded and pay about $1,000-ish and drive an entire solution through this channel instead of going premium. So you don't need premium. So the second is, once the data is in Azure Data Lake Gen 2, some of these components are what we are doing. So we use Azure Databricks and Spark. So how many of you use Azure Databricks? A couple of people. Great product. So it is Spark. It is an open platform. But Azure Databricks, it gives you a lot of the collaboration tools that you can work on. Primarily the code is Python. How many of you are Python developers? A couple. Yeah. PySpark, Python, and also you can write code in Java, so Scala and R. So these are so we wrote most of our code in Python and Scala. So that is running in Databricks. So our entire orchestration engine is Data Factory. I'll show you how the pipelines run and everything. So it really moves data from one place to another. It orchestrates through Databricks and pushes that profiles into Cosmos. So it's not necessary that we need Cosmos. We actually push the data to CDM itself. And for the faster access, Cosmos is always useful. So Cosmos can be an expensive product if you don't provision it right. So you have to understand what throughput means, how to provision the throughput. And if you do it right, storage it's not that expensive, and you can get a great document store solution. And then we can connect Power BI straight into it. So there are two ways that you can connect to Power BI for visualization and dashboards. One is you can directly connect Power BI to CDM folders, or you can connect Power BI to Cosmos. And then your Power Automate, I'll show you that too, is directly connected to CDM as well. Then you can drive the custom applications at the end. So this end-to-end solution can entirely run fairly open in an open platform, open source method. We are running the entire stack on Linux. There is no Windows instances for anything. So the cost of running infrastructure and hardware is pretty cheap. The second is we are primarily running on blob storage. And we use Synapse for some of the data warehousing and more analytics work. So we push the data downstream to Synapse too. But it is not a requirement that you need a data warehouse. But if you like to have one, definitely it's a possibility. And you can orchestrate all of this through Azure Data Factory. Okay. Any questions here in the more of a architecture diagram? Yeah.
I see stream analytics going to data flows.
Yes.
What is that?
That's a great question. So I missed that. So right now, Power BI has the ability to process stream. We are not using that. We are using Kafka and stream analytics just for the speed. So we need more speed. But if you want to do stream analytics, Power BI is good enough to get started. And if you have nothing, don't think like I need the next best solution and I'm going to stand up my Kafka cluster. So start with Power BI streaming, and then you can actually go from there. And it worked decently actually. Another option is, how many of you use App Insights here? Application Insights. App Insights has a way to do streaming too. So we do something called continuous export. So absorb the data from websites, go into App Insights, then you can configure App Insights to do a continuous exports into Azure Data Lake Gen 2. From there, you can trigger and pick up the data and then do your processing from there. All right, so I'll skip over all of this stuff and go straight to the demo. How much time we got? 6:44 already.
Yeah.
15 minutes. All right. Okay. I'll do some damage in 15 minutes. All right. So, oh man, time. There you go. That's our login screen. We use Azure B2C. Pretty awesome product, by the way. You don't have to write a lot of ugly code to manage logins. Okay. So this is a demonstration instance. So we have organized it as much as possible like dynamics, data, insights, action, right? Keep it really, really simple. So people who are dealing with data works on data. People who are dealing with insights work on insights. People who want to take action on it works on on the action side or the automation side. So the data part is Power BI data flows. Insights is a combination of Spark and a few other technologies, and Power BI for visualization. And the third, the automation part is Power Automate. Okay, so it's a combination of Power Platform, Power Automate. And the entire thing is embedded in our solution. So you will see, you can figure out what it is by looking at it since you have worked on it. But a customer who has never seen it, they will think that it is a built-in product, self-contained. So right here, I'll start with the data flows. So there are two, these are different sources of data that I'm pulling from. So I'm pulling data from a point of sale system, Dynamics 365 website, at different sources. I've just messed around with different names in here. So if I do an edit on any of this, or if I add ingest data, it will actually go to Power BI. Or if I want to add a data flow directly, so I can say it's a test data flow, I get all the different connectors. This you guys have seen, right? So this is pulling from a combination of Azure Data Factory and Power BI data flows, and it's a combination of both. So some of the things are more enterprise focused, but these are the connectors that you have it available. And then if I edit one of those, like for example, from our application, it goes straight into Power BI. And within Power BI, I go to the specific workspace, and I go to the data flows. I have these data flows. So there are two types of data flows. One is data flows that you build, and other is data flows other people build, which you consume. So it is called an external data flow. So how many of you use external tables in SQL or SQL? Yes. So same concept. It is a virtual schema within Power BI. So for example, if I'm building a data flow and I want to share with somebody else, I can keep my data in my common data model and in my storage, and I can connect it directly to Power BI on someone else. So I don't have to shuttle data from my space to another one. So for example, if I have the point of sales data, so now I want to recover from Scash. So this customer's data, all right, Power Query, come on, there you go. So this is actually Power BI data. So I consume this data from a source. You can actually see that right here. I did very little things with it. So I have a blob storage, which has a CSV file. I consume that data in. I promoted the headers, right? So first row is, and then I changed a few column types to mess around with it. That's all I did. And within our application, as you can see, this is the data that is sitting in the data store. In our entities model, which is pulling data out of the customer's data. And right now, this is it takes a few seconds to pull the data. It's actually directly coming from common data model. We haven't stored it anywhere else, so it is pulling it from a file in Azure Data Lake Gen 2 and pulling the data out and showing it. So it's the same data as you can see here that is represented here. So you can see the IDs and everything, and it is correctly here. So it's the same data. So now, as you can see, as a custom application developer, I'm able to consume data that is ingested by Power BI in the Power BI data flows. That's the first thing. And then all the schematic attributes that I was talking about, that is listed there too. So in common data model, there are two types of attribution to data. One is the entity names themselves, or the actual attributes, and their data type, like integer, string, and or whatnot. And then there is something called a type, which is your business data semantic model, right? So for example, something is a last name, so you can represent it as last name. So and so these are all the entities. So common data model works with a set of entities, and then you can create relationship between the entities. It's very similar to an ER diagram. So there are different types of entities. One is called a custom entity. We have created different groups of entities. that are, we call it as profile and timeline and whatnot. So you can name it whatever way you want. And this is where we can actually do actually mapping, matching, and merging, which is an MDM system where we can actually map different entities to different types. And then what we are doing is a match of different criteria. So, and I can set up different rules around this. I can match with email and full name, and I can edit, and I can set different precision levels on it. I want an exact match or high precision, low precision, and I can normalize this and run Spark jobs around it. So go ahead.
Do you have, I don't know if you want, run quick.
Yeah.
This is a workout for the day.
There's not write back, is there, for this? I mean, in other words, so master data management, obviously, you're trying to get single name for Joe Smith for multiple systems. Sometimes they're also set up to actually write back to the source system the final name for Joe Smith. Is that happening here as well or not? I mean, not that I would think it would be a requirement, but I'm just trying to extend
it's the overall, I can tell you the architectural philosophical representation of the team, how they approached it. There are two roles in common data model: data producers and data consumers. So if a data consumer become a data producer, it cannot write on to back to where it consumed from. So the best approach I would think is, it's a real requirement. So you have to write back to the source system, is going through the orchestrate step and having Power Automate write back to the source system. Yeah, I think so. That will actually give you the entire trail as well. Yeah.
Can you customize? Can you customize if there's a feature that doesn't exist? Can you write a script to customize your own way of?
Your this UI thing, or
yeah.
The entire user interface is JSON files. Our entire structure, it's a React UI, but it's JSON that actually is doing the work. So yeah.
Any other questions?
And, yep.
So I'm coming from the engineering side, but I'm just curious what you use as your orchestration tool.
Azure Data Factory.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Has everybody heard of Azure Data Factory before?
Yeah, I think there's a few.
You want to do it quick?
Yeah. So if you're moving data around from one place to the next, and if you actually want to visually see that, because if you write code and you totally forget what you did, and then you're like, okay, where's the code documentation go? Azure Data Factory is a great way to represent data orchestration, but actually it involves multiple different touch points. And also it is fairly flexible because it's JSON in the backend. So you can do for loops and iterations, and you can do a whole lot of stuff without writing specific code. And I mucked around with the JSON in the backend. I can make changes to it, and the visual UI comes up too. Yeah.
The top header looks a lot like Power Apps. Is that just a coincidence? You made it look that way, or it actually is running?
The latter. We try to stay as close to Power Apps as possible.
Okay.
The Power App, basically the instances are environments in Power Apps, and tenancy is subscriptions, I think, in the Azure world.
Okay.
So we try to stay as close to the Power Platform as much as possible.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and it's hard. One of the hard lessons we are learning is this team, Power Platform team, is moving so fast. As ISVs, we are trying to catch up, and it's like, where do you guys go? So then one day they broke the entire data Power BI data flows, right? So, I'm sorry, we have a new role that we need to add to Azure Data Lake Gen 2, but the support team didn't even know about it. So data flow broke for 3 days, right? So
It's not considered GA.
yeah, it's kind of no, it is still preview.
It's still
Yeah, and that was the answer. And then documentation is never kept up to date. Remember, don't believe the documentation. Go back to the software. So they'll keep changing that too. It's quite interesting. So,
Any other questions?
yeah. Okay. So, and I actually, so getting, I'm showing like 100, users and stuff, but we have, customers with several 100,000, 1 million users. So I can just show the data here. So, but getting a match rate of 100% is almost impossible. So don't. This is just a demo.
100%?
100% match rate, right? And so the timelines data is another thing we look at. But I'll show you something that once it's all done, how it looked like. So I want to bring up a specific customer, and I can actually show a customer journey. This is what it's looked like, right? So we usually pull all the data from different source systems. We organize them in different ways, and we can actually pull it all together in one timeline. So all of the attributes of a customer is pulled in here too, and then we can create audiences. I'll show you. I'll actually run an engine change with an audience, so I can edit this criteria, customers with open cases, so I can mess around with it, right? And I can save this. I'm going to activate this audience. So what this process does is it kicks off Azure Data Factory in the backend. So if I go to our Azure Data Factory, so you can see the pipeline runs here. Yeah. So some of this ADF and Azure Databricks is pretty heavy JavaScript load, just like Power Query. So you have to. So if I go to all pipeline runs, so you can see this pipeline is actually in progress. So you can see in the back end. So what it is doing is the website, our application send a request to Azure Data Factory, was a web request with a certain number of parameters. It kicked off a Azure Databricks notebook, which is written in PySpark. And once the audience is completed, it actually said, hey, the stuff is done, otherwise it's a failure. We wrote an Azure function in Python, which modifies the CDM schema. And once the schema modification is done, we actually said, hey, this is actually complete. And then we have another notebook, which basically writes the data into Cosmos, and we're done. Yeah, so essentially it goes through a few steps in the batch process. As you can see, right now it is actually running the code to bring the notebook. It is actually done. It's going very fast. So and it is actually writing to Cosmos, and this is Azure Data Factory. Azure Databricks. If I go to the audience plan, so this is the PySpark code that actually just ran. So it has a lot of technologies involved in it, but we really know what actually is going on. There's a full traceability of what is going on and actually produce the output. So hopefully it is done. Actually writing to Cosmos takes more time because the Cosmos throttles the write. So bulk writing Cosmos is much more faster. So we are writing it individually. So each transaction, it just waits for a longer time. Okay, that is done. All right, so it is almost done. It's calling the sign. Yeah, almost. A few more seconds. There you go.
The question about runs.
Yeah, it's done. Okay.
Did you have multiple customers with multiple tenants?
Yes. Each customer is a tenant. Each tenant can have different instances.
Okay.
So in Power Platform, it's the same thing. So a tenant is a subscription, I would say, or an Active Directory tenancy that you have. And then your environments it could be departments, your sandbox, whatever else. And then a CDM will host, there is a common data service per environment. And so as you create new environments or new instances, you have a CDM attached to it. But you could have one CDM folder pushing everything into Azure Data Lake Gen 2, and then you have one common data service actually surfacing it up.
So when you deploy to a customer, this is running in their tenant or in your tenant?
So we have two ways to deploy it. One is we can deploy in our tenant, in our Azure tenant, and use their Azure Data Lake Gen 2 account.
Okay.
So which you can do too, right? So if you're building something for your organization, you can have different Azure Data Lake Gen 2 accounts. By the way, once this, it's not Salesforce.
No sales words.
No Salesforce. So it actually created this audience just now. It just ran, so showing East Coast time, but it just ran and completed 13 profiles out of it. So then we have other metrics and things like that. But the beautiful part is I want to touch on Power Automate very quick, and I'll be available for questions, after the meeting. So this is Power Automate inside our applications embedded in it. So as you can see, we have written a connector, which is fairly easy to do. So it triggers a flow, get the entities, create an HTML and send an email, right? So you can actually create a lot of new Power Automate things with it. And UI flows is RPA. It's still not available, but UI flows allows you to do robotic process automation. But this in itself, if you can think of this, the amount of time this saves for any company is just huge, right? And the backend of this whole thing is also a JSON file, right? So our entire connector is written in such a way that I can pull from, this is like, different instances that we have in this particular tenant. And then I can bring any audience that I just created, right? So like, for example, customers with open cases, this is what I just did. So I can say, well, customers with open cases, pull that data, save it, and then execute it, right? So I can test it, I'll perform a trigger action, boom, actually run the flow, all right? There you go, super simple. So, but it all sits in the confines of one application, and it worked. So, all right.
So your platform works.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.